So, David Lammy wants to abolish jury trials, the cornerstone of British justice that's been around for centuries, and apparently he thinks this is perfectly reasonable despite tweeting complete opposite just 5 years ago. Meanwhile, Rayner is orchestrating what can only be described as a parliamentary mutiny behind the scenes. Nearly 36 Labour MPs are signing letters calling Lammy's plan stupid and undemocratic, and the whole thing is spiraling into a civil war that makes Game of Thrones look like a polite disagreement at a parish council meeting. Oh, and Robert Jenrick just accused the entire Labour government of thinking ordinary Britons are too thick to sit on juries. Honestly, you couldn't script this level of chaos if you tried. Buckle up, because this gets absolutely wild. Quick favor, if you're loving this breakdown of Labour's latest self-inflicted catastrophe, smash that subscribe button right now. Over 94% of you watching haven't subscribed yet. It's completely free, takes literally 1 second, and it means the absolute world to us here at British Mirror. Hit that notification bell too so you never miss when we expose the next political disaster unfolding in real time. Cheers if you did. Right. Back to the glorious implosion. Let us start with the absolutely delicious irony at the heart of this entire debacle. David Lammy, the current Foreign Secretary who clearly fancies himself as some sort of criminal justice reformer, wants to scrap jury trial for all but the most serious crimes. Now, on the surface, he's claiming this is about tackling court backlogs, about efficiency, about modernizing a system that's groaning under the weight of delayed cases. Sounds reasonable enough, right? Except for one tiny, minuscule, absolutely devastating detail. Back in 2020, the very same David Lammy tweeted, and I quote directly here because you genuinely cannot make this up, "Jury trials are a fundamental part of our democratic settlement. Criminal trials without juries are a bad idea. A fundamental part of our democratic settlement. A bad idea to remove them." His words, not mine. And now, just 5 years later, is pushing through legislation to do exactly what he called a bad idea. The hypocrisy is so thick you could spread it on toast. When confronted with this rather glaring contradiction, Lammy insists he has not changed his mind. Not changed his mind. That's like saying you love pizza while simultaneously trying to ban all cheese and tomato products. The mental gymnastics required to maintain this position deserve an Olympic gold medal. Either he's changed his mind and lacks the courage to admit it, or he genuinely believes that abolishing something he called fundamental to our democratic settlement somehow doesn't constitute changing his mind. Both options are absolutely spectacular in their awfulness. But here's where this story transforms from merely embarrassing into full-blown political warfare. Enter Carl Turner, the Labour MP for Hull East, who has absolutely had enough of this nonsense. Turner has branded Lammy's plan as both stupid and undemocratic, which, let us be honest, is parliamentary language for "this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard and I've sat through Prime Minister's questions." Turner hasn't just been quietly grumbling into his tea in the Commons tea room. Oh no, he's launched a full-scale rebellion, drafting a letter opposing the move to abandon centuries-old trial by jury, and has been collecting signatures like they're going out of fashion. By last Friday, Turner had secured nearly 30 Labour MP signatures on his letter. By the close of play today, that number has risen to 35. That's 35 of Lammy's own colleagues publicly saying his plan is rubbish. Turner is hoping to reach around 50 signatures before submitting it, which would represent a significant chunk of the Parliamentary Labour Party essentially telling their own government to take a long walk off a short pier. This isn't just backbench grumbling. This is an organized, coordinated rebellion with specific objectives and growing momentum. In parliamentary terms, this is the equivalent of your own family taking out a full-page newspaper advert saying they disagree with your life choices. Now, government whips, those delightful individuals whose job involves keeping MPs in line through a charming combination of persuasion, threats, and probably some light blackmail, are reportedly instructing Labour MPs not to sign Turner's letter. They're even telling MPs who've already signed to remove their names. Imagine that conversation. "Hello, yes, we know you think this policy is stupid and undemocratic, but could you please pretend you don't?" There's a good chapter. The fact that whips had to actively intervene to stop MPs signing a letter opposing their own government's policy tells you absolutely everything about how catastrophically unpopular this plan is within Labour's own ranks. But wait. There is more, because Rayner has entered the chat. Rayner, who served as Deputy Prime Minister under Starmer before the most recent reshuffle, still wields enormous power within the Labour Party. She's got significant support among the membership, considerable influence among MPs, and apparently she's absolutely against Lammy's jury trial abolition scheme. According to Turner, Rayner is making representations to ministers and the Prime Minister behind the scenes. That's political speak for she's tearing strips off people in private meetings and making it very clear this policy is electoral suicide. Turner says Rayner can see two crucial things. First, she understands the consequences of these ill-thought-through plans on the criminal justice system itself. Removing jury trials doesn't just affect court backlogs. It fundamentally alters how justice is administered, who gets to participate in that process, and whether ordinary citizens have any role in determining guilt or innocence. It's not tinkering around the edges. It's demolishing a load-bearing wall. Second, and probably more importantly from a political perspective, Rayner recognizes how politically damaging this will be at the next election. Can you imagine the attack adverts? Labour, they don't trust you to serve on a jury. Why would you trust them to govern? It writes itself. Turner is growing more confident by the day that this legislation will be voted down by MPs, and is certain it won't pass the House of Lords. The Lords, for all their ermine robes and arcane procedures, do occasionally serve as a useful check on government overreach, and abolishing a cornerstone of British justice would definitely qualify. If Turner is right, and this rebellion continues growing, Lammy's plan could become the first major legislative defeat for this Labour government. That would be absolutely humiliating, particularly on something the Foreign Secretary has personally championed. Meanwhile, the Conservatives are having an absolute field day with this whole debacle. Robert Jenrick, former immigration minister and prominent Tory, has led the charge against Lammy's proposals with accusations that are genuinely devastating. Jenrick claims that Keir Starmer and David Lammy believe ordinary people are too stupid to sit on juries and oversee justice. That's an absolutely brutal line of attack, and it's remarkably effective because it cuts right to the heart of what jury trials represent. They are not just about legal procedure. They are about democratic participation, about trusting citizens to weigh evidence and reach verdicts, about ensuring justice isn't solely administered by elites in wigs. Jenrick argues that if Lammy's proposals pass, it's the beginning of the end for jury trials. He's framing this as a slippery slope, and honestly, it's hard to argue against that logic. If you abolish jury trials for most crimes now, what stops future governments expanding that further? What prevents gradual erosion until jury trials exist only in theory rather than practice? Jenrick also points out something rather inconvenient for Lammy. If the Foreign Secretary was genuinely interested in tackling court backlogs, he would get courts sitting around the clock. Extended hours, weekend sessions, properly funded court services. But Lammy refuses to pursue that option. Even more damningly, Lammy himself has apparently confessed that slashing jury trials won't even guarantee the backlog falls. So we're abolishing a fundamental democratic right for a policy that might not even achieve its stated objective. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Jenrick's conclusion is savage. The truth is that many in the Labour Party simply don't trust ordinary people to make decisions. The message from Starmer is clear. Ordinary people are too stupid, too troublesome, too time-consuming to be trusted with administering justice. Whether you agree with Jenrick's politics or not, you have to admit that's an absolutely devastating critique. It positions Labour as elitist, condescending, and fundamentally distrustful of the very people they claim to represent. That's a kind of political framing that sticks, that gets repeated, that forms a basis of effective opposition messaging for months or years. Let us talk about what this rebellion actually means for Labour's stability. This isn't some obscure policy disagreement about agricultural subsidies or technical amendments to planning regulations. This is a fight over fundamental principles of British justice, democracy, and trust in ordinary citizens. When 35 MPs are willing to publicly oppose their own government on something this significant, that's a massive red flag about party unity. When the former Deputy Prime Minister is making representations behind the scenes against government policy that suggests serious fractures at the highest levels of Labour. Jury trials have been a cornerstone of English law since the Magna Carta in 1215. That's over 800 years of legal tradition, of citizens participating directly in the administration of justice, of the principle that your peers should judge you rather than solely legal professionals appointed by the state. Yes, The system has evolved considerably since 1215, but the core principle remains remarkably consistent. Ordinary people, randomly selected from the community, hear evidence and determine guilt or innocence. It's democracy in its most direct form, applied to the justice system. The arguments for maintaining jury trials are compelling. They provide legitimacy to verdicts in a way that judge-only trials simply cannot match. When 12 citizens unanimously or by majority agree on a verdict that represent community consensus about guilt or innocence, they act as a check on state power, ensuring the prosecution must convince ordinary people, not just legal professionals who might have institutional biases. They bring diverse perspectives, life experiences, and common sense to legal proceedings. A jury might spot inconsistencies in testimony or recognize implausible scenarios that a judge, immersed in legal technicalities, might overlook. The argument against them, which Lammy presumably subscribed to, focus on efficiency and cost. Jury trials take longer, cost more, require coordinating 12 people's schedules, and occasionally produce verdicts that legal professionals find baffling. Court backlogs have reached crisis levels, with cases delayed for years, victims waiting endlessly for justice, and defendants left in legal limbo. Something needs to change. The argument goes, and jury trials are an obvious target for reform.